How many people do you know who own a gun?
There's a revert brother by the name of Mark. He's been Muslim about 2 years. So he's one of the brothers that comes out to dinner with us on a regular basis. And when he's with me, I'm getting a call from North London, South London, East London, sometimes from prison. And he says, you know what? If you're to be a gangster, you be the baddest one because you're in touch with all the gangsters from all over London.
Happy New Year, Omar.
Happy New Year to you too, Salman.
It's Muharram now. So something that's quite embarrassing for me was I just realized, like, I think a year or two ago, that I didn't actually know the order of the Islamic months. Yeah. I only realized when I was teaching my own kids.
Okay, subhanAllah.
So they know it, alhamdulillah.
So you went up until midnight, the night before the Islamic New Year.
I know because of the song. Muharram, Safar, Rabiul. You know the song?
Yeah, I know the song.
You know the order of the Islamic months?
I don't sing it. I do now for the same reason.
Yeah, what are they?
Why are you testing me for?
Test unit.
No, don't test me, bro.
I asked you first.
Doesn't matter. No, I ain't testing me, bro. What do you think this is?
I hope
I'm not smart to Jannah, bro.
So, had it been like 1st January, everyone would have known about it, isn't it? So, that's the kind of depressing thing that we're separated from our heritage. We have our own calendar.
Yeah.
Just wondering, how to instill that sense of.
But how much of relevance does it play to people?
It's really important because it's not just some relic that's kind of some relic of our history. It's necessary for, like, I think at least 3 out of all the pillars of Islam. So obviously Ramadan, Hajj, and Zakat. Yeah, mashallah. By the way, mashallah, we have Imam Shakeel.
Oh, sorry, you're welcome.
Getting lost in Omar rudely forgot to introduce our esteemed guest, mashallah.
I'll introduce the Imam then,
So
Imam Shakeel. Alhamdulillah. We're in a time actually where we have, mashallah, plethora of ulama. We have many people who are alims. And then alhamdulillah, we also have people who are
I'm trying to say humble,
Rabbani, they're leaders. And very rarely will you find, Allah bless our dear Imam, people who have both. And our guest today is Imam Shakeel, the Imam of Lewisham Masjid, who for us is an alim and a leader, and from the great work that he does with his community in Lewisham Masjid. Alhamdulillah, may Allah preserve him and bless him. And he's our very special guest today, and he interrupted earlier, which is all right. Alhamdulillah, Jazakum khairan. Welcome to the podcast, Sheikh.
Not just Imam of senior Imam of Lewisham Mosque, but I think general veteran in the Dawah Muslim community here. But maybe I shouldn't use kind of militaristic language to describe.
Obviously.
I was trying.
Veteran,
I sidestepped that, Sheikh, but you see.
I can neither confirm nor deny that one. Yeah?
You know
what do you
bad,
prefer?
Sheikh.
Maybe a colonel, brigadier, general? Just give me a
Major.
nod when you.
I'll give you a nod.
Major.
Yeah. Major. One thing I don't get, Gaddafi.
Yeah.
Like, he was a dictator. He was in charge of everything. Why did he only make himself colonel?
Maybe like KFC.
Yeah. Anyway, mashallah, Imam Shakeel is from, not to be rude or anything, the older generation, from my perspective. Maybe the same generation as you.
Yeah, I'd love to be part of that generation. And then,
but we thought we'd have Imam Sahib on to share his wisdom, from his experience in the UK Dawah scene. So we're just talking about the youths. Rekindling their, the connection to the heritage, the legacy of Islam. How do you go about doing that? Is that something you want to, one of your aims in your dawah in your community? Obviously,
I think, firstly, you've got the nasheed, obviously, which you were singing. Yeah, that's a start. Secondly, I think in terms of, it's a prophetic methodology. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran in Surah Al-Kahf mentions إِنَّهُمْ فِتْيَةٌ آمَنُوا بِرَبِّهِمْ وَزِدْنَاهُمْ هُدًى. What does Imam Ibn Kathir rahimahullah in the tafsir say about fitya? That many of the companions who accepted Islam in Mecca were youngsters. So it's very important that Prophet ﷺ gave attention to the youngsters and youth. So rekindling that kind of like heritage and connection to Islam through Islamic history, I think it should be a role of really every Muslim. And remember, these are the ones that will be the leaders within our community and so on.
MashaAllah.
Yeah.
MashaAllah. What's your a bit of your background? So me, for example, I became practicing, kind of
Not too long ago.
Not too long ago, yeah, relatively. So people my age or perhaps younger wouldn't know your background, your history, maybe. So if you just maybe introduce yourself to, where were you born and raised?
Yeah. I think different, South London, different from many parts of London. And I think where I grew up, which is the London Borough of Lewisham, more different back in those days, in the early days. So, in my primary school, I remember not knowing a single Muslim. In my secondary school, maybe in my whole year, one or two. So neighbors, close friends were all non-Muslims. I didn't really come across Muslims until my late teens, 17, 18. And so in terms of influence from Muslims, very, very little. I did come across an individual who gave me a copy of the Quran, a translation, the meaning of it in the English language, which kind of kindled in me a passion to study or read the Quran. The same individual gave me the book of the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ in English, and that kind of gave me a further passion to kind of study and further look into Islam. But very, very little interaction with the Muslim community. Very few Muslims were around in the Borough of Lewisham. You'd hardly see a hijab, hardly see a Muslim on the street.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, but from now you guys have taken over.
No comment again. You can neither confirm nor deny.
So alhamdulillah, from there, Sheikh, having that brief introduction, was it an aim always to be an imam of a masjid, or was it, just something you kind of fell into naturally?
It was never an aim in that sense. The aim was, the passion to understand the Arabic language. Okay. So when I first started praying, attending, prayers, Taraweeh prayers, and you're hearing the Imam recite, you get that passion, look, I need to understand that language. So initially, it was just going abroad to study Arabic language, and that was it. It's when I came back that, the Imam at that time in Lewisham, he said, look, I'm leaving. Can you kind of take over? And I remember telling him, look, he was going to America. I said, look, I'll cover your post until you return. And 21 years later, I'm still here.
21 years later, he's not back yet.
He's not back yet.
Because I hold this for a second.
Alhamdulillah.
So where did you go to study Arabic?
Islamic University of Medina.
Okay, mashallah.
Yeah.
So what year was that roughly?
1990.
1990, mashallah. So that was part of the early batch.
Probably the first batch.
First batch, mashallah.
Sheikh Faraz, Sheikh Farid, that batch.
You missed all the fun and games in the UK while you were gone, Sheikh, or was it?
Came back to them. Came back to them.
Some would argue started them in Saudi and brought it back with you. No.
Maybe not me.
No, of course. Alhamdulillah. So how do you find, has the community changed over the years? Have you found in terms of background of people and Islamic understanding, the needs and wants of the community from when you first started those 21 years ago? How has it changed over the years?
I think greatly. I mean, sometimes you listen to, let's say, discussions or have discussions, and people see a lot of negativity around, especially with the age of social media, in terms of sins and promotion of sins, which is there. But I also see a very positive angle taking place, especially amongst Muslim youth. Islam is becoming mainstream. People speak about Islam and Muslims. Muslims in UK, the youngsters, you have a sense of identity towards Islam, and they feel proud of it.
Do you think that's more than before?
Much more.
In terms of numbers or percentage-wise?
Numbers and percentage. And I think, because of the generation kind of gap between some of us, some of the younger brothers, maybe like yourself, Salman, so you're looking at the last 5-10 years. MashaAllah. I just say Omar, by the way. I just said. But, if you look 20 years ago, 25 years ago, it's a big shift towards positivity. I mean, look, organizations, while the challenges of Islamophobia and, the war on terror is there wasn't MRDF around. Yeah, there wasn't Cage around. There wasn't MEND around. There wasn't, some of these organizations that are there challenging kind of the negative, challenges that are facing the Muslim community are there now, and led by youngsters and Muslims proud of their Islamic identity. So I think that's, in my perception anyway, very, very positive and important.
If you were to give yourself a message 20 years ago, what would you do differently? What would you say to the young Imam Shakeel that, do more of this, don't do more of that, don't do this, do that?
I would say in terms of being more involved in the wider non-Muslim community. Yeah, it's something that I tell youngsters now, look, we're leaders. Allah Ta'ala has blessed us. The Messenger of Allah was a leader for all. And if you look at Islamic personalities of the past, let's say, Muhammad Ali is an example. He was a leader for all. Malcolm X was a leader for all.
SubhanAllah, so massive.
Yeah, so Imams, that's the message that really we should be out there. And I should have been out there more 20 years ago. Yeah.
Okay, how do you think the dawah in general has changed? In terms of, you mentioned organizations doing some good work, but what about in terms of the kind of dynamics between different kind of, don't want to say sects, but schools of thought, and kind of the intra, because we hear a lot that the 90s was dominated by kind of intra-Muslim infighting and all that kind of disunity. Is that something that an accurate kind of representation of that time, or a bit of a reaction?
It was there. I wouldn't say it was, if you are in bubbles and circles, then that's all you see. So maybe those who are just within those circles just see, look, okay, this group against that group and that group against this group. But I think, look, the khair in the ummah is the masses, they're not like this. The masses of Muslims love Allah and His Messenger and want to follow a simple Islam. And that's always remained. And now over time, the time that we're living in, even the youngsters within those, let's say, groups or sects or jama'at are also seeing. And you can go from one masjid to another masjid. How do you feel? You feel a sense of brotherhood and sisterhood and love. Yeah. And
was that always been the case, you're saying?
I think with the masses, there were certain, young crowds were, involved in certain kind of like sectarian kind of like narratives.
Yeah.
But again, that wasn't the masses.
When did you become kind of practicing? And what was the kind of landscape of South London?
South London, oh wow, subhanAllah. All right. I started becoming practicing around early 90s, actually. And then was going to a well-known study circle in South London at the time.
So did you know Imam Shakeel?
I knew of Imam Shakeel then, yeah. He used to go down to
Was he part of your crew or the other crew?
Shakeel was always part of our crew, man, alhamdulillah.
So we used to see one another, just look one another like
fall into a salam. No, alhamdulillah. It was, the thing is, when you're young, that was my early teens, you don't know anything. You just know slogans. You don't have the ability to critically analyze things. And some things feel so, to the fitrah, like you see these people that mashallah practice, etc., but you're somehow supposed to have some sort of hatred towards them. And hatred, I know, is a strong word, but unfortunately, the kind of narrative that was going around at that time, it sort of created that sense of animosity.
Yeah.
And then as you mature anyway, and as Sheikh was saying, that look, when you're in your own little circle, it's easy to be like that. As soon as you just try interacting with the general public and the real world, you realize, actually, man, we're a very, very, very small percentage who are in those circles of those discussions.
The people on the haqq.
We hope so, inshallah. Allah's mercy is wide, man. And you realize the average person, they've got so many issues, scheme problems, subhanAllah. And you talking about these different elements, whilst it has its place, it doesn't help them, bring them closer to Allah.
I mean, the conversation we had with Sheikh Yasir Qadi, he touched on some of that as well, and it made quite a bit of a stir, on social media and stuff, because his argument was that, the people that are inclined towards getting into that kind of bubble or this group or that group, they're like the kind of 1% or whatever that are taking their deen so seriously. And if they're kind of disuniting with each other and splitting, they're making that small percentage ever smaller. And that's the kind of really successful trick of shaitan, isn't it? Because those are the people that can, if they did unite, if they did, cooperate on the stuff they do agree on, then they could grow that circle and get it bigger and bigger and have more impact.
Imam Shakeel, probably you know this better, mashallah, from the different people you've met over the years, that in all of these groups, there'd always be people who were well-mannered, people who were connected to the Quran, people who were pious. And you find, and they'd still be small. Whichever group you went into, they'd always stood out. It wasn't just the fact that you're part of a group that suddenly everything else is okay. But those who were close and sincere, you always found them, subhanAllah, even if you disagreed with them on certain issues, but they still had these beautiful qualities.
And I think look, that's an important point also, because the way they treat you, then you treat them back in that way, and that eventually created that kind of like these, let's call them jama'ats or groups, coming together through these well-mannered brothers who were attached to the Quran and so on. And you're right, each group had those few, and they made a big difference and a big change towards where we are today. But saying that, I think Dr. Yasser Qadhi's kind of like some of his points and comments, again, very important, because a lot of stuff which might be pushed towards youngsters, how much of it is relevant. And when Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah kind of discussed the creed of the Sahaba, and he said, look, these were simple individuals. Why can't we just keep it simple and straightforward, even for the masses? You love Allah, you worship Allah, you love the Prophet, you follow the Prophet, and unite people on those fundamentals and basics that everybody can really agree on. And I think that's important as well, as inshallah for the next kind of like generation and the youngsters.
So I mean, going back to when you so you came back from Medina University, you take a position in Lewisham Islamic Center. What are some of the things that kind of had an impact on you historically? Some of the people that had an impact on you
in terms of events in Islamic history, or
I mean, throughout your life, because I mean, you wrote an article on the Sound Trillion. You talked about the New Cross fires.
Yeah.
You talked about Darkest How. Yeah. So you talked about kind of the Afro-Caribbean community whilst growing up. What kind of impact did that have? And
so, I mean, I would say a major impact. Reason being, and it's sometimes some of the young Imams, I said we can learn a lot from the Afro-Caribbean community, because, they remain steadfast. They went through struggles that we are going through today, and they challenged, the kind of like racism that they were facing and so on. So most of my close friends were from the Afro-Caribbean community. The time when I was growing up, very few Africans. So in my class, for example, in school, you have a lot of Afro-Caribbean youngsters, but from the African community, one or two. The vast majority are, either themselves, parents are from Jamaica, or they've come from Jamaica at a very young age, or from the Caribbean. So their experiences of challenging racism, their experiences of being confident, that had a major impact on me. And also in terms of, because these are my close friends, there was never an issue in terms of, let's say, not to deal with non-Muslims. I grew up with non-Muslims. They're my friends. So that was always in me to say, look, you know what? Dealing with non-Muslims, engaging with them, it's not like a taboo subject or something that needs to be discussed. It was kind of like a bit normal to me.
How did you manage the wala and bara then, Sheikh? Did you was that ever a...
I can neither confirm nor deny that one.
Wala and who?
You're going to have to redact all of this.
Wala and wala.
Wala. Alhamdulillah. So, Sheikh, okay, look.
But so they did still radicalize you, isn't it? But they radicalized you in the kind of black power kind of tradition.
I think in a positive way.
Anti-racism and that kind of stuff. So that's a good kind of... Do you feel that had a lasting impact on you then today? Because if somebody's looking at... And I'm just thinking of people we know, those that have some, credentials when it came to anti-racism in the past, they kind of recognize the structurally racist elements of prevent and counterterrorism legislation, and they kind of had a head start on everyone else, and they called like prevent out for what it was and certain government policies before most of the Muslim community, maybe while we were kind of saying, well, we'll have some of that funding or whatever, we need to change the double glazing on the mosque, whatever. But they were kind of speaking out, and they had a head start in that. So there's a lot of the things that we are going through now, the Afro-Caribbean community did go through, not just in the UK, but like, have you seen the documentary 13 about the 13th Amendment? Right, it's an amazing, very powerful documentary. It was on Netflix. I don't know if it still is. But it's like condensing 150 years of black history in America into like one documentary. Is very powerful, and you see, for example, in the 70s and 80s, the kind of policies targeted ostensibly against kind of drugs and all that kind of stuff in the US context. But similar things happen in the UK if you read authors from here.
So it's a side point. So I think
Yeah.
one thing is, as Muslims, especially let's say non-black Muslims, we don't appreciate their struggle and don't sometimes understand what they've been through or go through, and that's kind of very, very important. And that's further divides and alienates us from them and them from us and so on. Especially from an Islamic perspective, we're supposed to be this sense of brotherhood, sisterhood, oneness of the ummah and so on. So that's very important. Another important point is there's this documentary that came out about the Central Park Five.
Okay, yeah.
I think they made a movie of it, but
They see us or something.
When they see us.
when they see
When
something
they
like
see us,
this.
yeah.
So again, look what they've been through and a number of years and how that's impacted them. And one of them, because he was slightly older, he remained for a considerable time inside. But also as growing up, because of my friends from the Afro-Caribbean community, I watched Roots with them when I was in secondary school, maybe year 7, year 8.
I saw that as well.
Yeah, so that had
History.
an impact. So one thing was concerning the oppressed. This is before even I started kind of like praying or practicing Afro-Caribbean community, Afro-American community, slavery, Palestinian resistance, the history behind the Aborigines of Australia, the way the Native Americans were treated. It always kind of like touched me.
Yeah.
So that had an impact towards towards me practicing, because in Islam I saw, it's a religion and a deen that stands against oppression. So that has major impact.
Since you've touched upon this topic, Sheikh, I'm going to say, alhamdulillah, from the black experience, and they've been oppressed, but I guess you would not say that their response has been a subjugated response. Now, alhamdulillah, they stand up, etc. Versus people, like say, from the Indian subcontinent experience, and then we still get this kind of feeling that perhaps the early generations are a bit more subjugated, had a colonized mindset. Why do you think was the difference? Is it because they weren't oppressed to the same degree, or have you ever thought about this, or what's your own understanding of it? Because they don't seem to be leading the charge on this. And we should, everything you said, Sheikh, is absolutely true. Yeah. That if we stand up against oppression, not if such and such group is oppressed, if the dhulm is dhulm at the end of the day, we should try and wipe it out wherever it is.
Yeah. I mean, Allah knows best, but if you look at maybe the oppression towards the black community has been different. Yeah, so we really, until now, with the prevent strategy, we haven't faced some of the struggles they've been through. I remember youngsters being in my class, very intelligent, not being pushed towards study.
Yeah,
you're a good sportsman. You need to be in the football team. You need to be in the basketball team. But excelling in education, even though they're highly intelligent, they're not encouraged. So there was something systematic, kind of put them down. The, let's say, Asian community. So even, look, I'm born in Kenya.
Yeah.
Now,
Jambo
Habarigani. How do you know that?
That's how we roll, Sheikh.
That's how we roll, mashallah. South London only, yeah?
Exactly.
You guys won't get this. Okay, finally, I was waiting for one.
That was the sound of the crickets in the jungle.
Yeah, so even in East Africa, the colonialists, under them were the Asians, and then you had the indigenous.
So it was a hierarchy, and they shipped in the Asians to manage they had the blacks at the bottom, the coloured in the middle, and then the whites at the top.
Yeah.
So
that kind of like, you haven't seen these challenges, or we haven't seen the challenges that they faced.
Yeah.
So that's played a part in us not standing up. Yeah.
But some of the things I get the impression, like from the 80s maybe, just from reading and listening to people, that there were more Asians in the anti-racism movement, but then they kind of died out or something, or maybe Asians got more preoccupied with something else. The cynic in me would say maybe there was an attempt to kind of split Afro-Caribbeans and Asians
in the UK,
in terms of
in
terms of anti-racism.
I can think of one name. I think his name was Tariq Ali.
Yes,
Tariq Ali, but very few.
Like someone very senior in Black Panthers UK was an Indian person.
Yeah, but you will find it's one or two.
Yeah,
it's not like a vast majority. So the same with the South African experience. Ahmed Katrada,
yes,
him, and maybe a few others. But how many Asians in South Africa took a stance against kind of like the apartheid system? So that's kind of like an angle. The other thing, it might be that sometimes you don't feel Remember, some of the Afro-Caribbean community are now 3rd, 4th generation.
Yeah.
And maybe they feel confident enough to feel that they're part of society. Do we feel the same? Yeah, you know what? Look, they might send me back. Look, I'm not fully British. No, we're here to stay and
behave yourself. Keep your head down.
That's it. So that plays a part as well.
They're kind of right though with you, with what happening with Shamima Begum or someone, you know, that your citizen, your continuity here is kind of predicated on good behavior. If you step out of line, people might feel that because your parents were born somewhere else, you can have your citizenship revoked. But that's the kind of vicious cycle. Then it stops you,
But it needs to be challenged.
Yeah,
it needs to be challenged. I remember, they had this movie, and then on the billboards, posters, was it Queen Victoria and Abdul?
Yeah.
So I remember one of the youngsters from the mosque, we're kind of like walking on the street, and I said, look at that poster, what do you think of it? And he said, good. And I said, no. Because,
No, films are haram.
Should be Abdul and Victoria.
Neither confirm nor deny again.
Yeah.
Well, what was your point?
Yeah, so, it's like good in a sense that when you're a slave and you're serving, then it's good. But you're not on equal footing.
Yeah.
You want to be equal with everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is it. If you truly, a lot of the people who feel that they are British citizens and they don't speak how, that's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it? Because if you truly feel part of the setup, Britain, etc., then you should feel that you want to change it for the better and you have that sense of ownership. But I find that people who normally espouse those things aren't the ones who speak out. They stay quiet and someone else actually has to take the mantle.
I mean, it's interesting, similar to what the brothers from Birmingham said when you had a podcast about the whole LGBT lessons and that row. They were saying that the protests happening against the kind of pro LGBT, what they call kind of proselytizing. They're saying the protests are led by the young mums. Not against the teachers and in those two schools, and the older generation are the kind of saying, this is a Christian country, just be quiet, do what they say, and that kind of stuff. And it's the younger ones who feel we belong here, a bit more kind of confident in their Britishness and a bit more feisty as a result, saying, who the hell are you to tell me what is a right and wrong relationship, whatever.
Yep. It reminds me, actually, made me should laugh, but one brother was telling me that when his dad first came to the country from Bangladesh, landed at the airport, and there was a white guy sweeping, so he took the broom off him and he started sweeping instead. Because it was the idea of a white person sweeping. He thought there's something wrong here, so he started that's my job. Yeah, exactly.
I wouldn't believe that was true, but a few years ago, what happened to me was I was working in a summer job, and this is when I was at uni, and it was a Pakistani brother next to me. We're just like packing boxes or whatever, and he goes, "What do you do for uni?" I said, "I'm kind of studying biochemistry." And he was like, "What is that, like DNA and all that kind of stuff?" He's like, "Oh, really? Maybe then you can do some research to find out why are they superior to us." And I was like, "Oh, good joke." And then I was looked at him. He was like, "Serious?" I was like, "Wow." They've kind of internalized that.
Yeah, but I think another side point is in terms of us also, because that's another discussion. Look, home, where is home?
Yeah.
And sooner we come to that kind of like realization, look, this is our home. And we work for the betterment of the society and challenge anything which is negative and challenge Islamophobia. Because there is also that, especially with, I wouldn't say it's just with the elder community, sometimes even amongst the youngsters. Look, I want to go back home.
Yeah.
So that kind of like also, is an impediment in us progressing. So that needs to be kind of like discussed and challenged as well.
It's true. Also, the Sheikh, just, I mean, look, we're talking about the early generation, and perhaps, they're more allowing of certain things. But for the same token, they've preserved much better their understanding of Islam and what they have. Okay, maybe it wasn't as sophisticated as what youngsters today have, but they established the masajid. They would hold on to all of the outward practices as well as inwards, inshallah, and they've kept it simple. For them, it's non-negotiable. Whether you're fasting 20 hours or 22 hours in summer, it wasn't a discussion for them. We're looking for fatwas to benchmark it to Saudi and whatever. They were like, they just got on with it. And we are actually, I think, maybe it's not just the Muslims, but generally the millennials today, they're kind of, millennials yet. They're a lot softer than our parents and haven't faced that level of hardship as well. So that early generation, alhamdulillah, they established what they needed to do. We have people today, mashallah, they've got multiple houses, but they can't buy a mosque. I've been to some communities, mashallah, very, very wealthy, sheikh, very, very wealthy, mashallah. The houses at least 1.5 to 2 million. Can you imagine that? And the amount they raised for their masjid was maybe about 20,000 after a massive event. Imagine that.
Yeah. So
they spend all their money on the houses.
But this is it. It's just the change. Do you see the approach?
So I think appreciating what they've done, and especially in terms of, because sometimes we feel, like the Muslim community sometimes lacks shukr, that sense of gratitude for achievements of others. So establishing masajid, halal outlets for food and so on. This needs to be appreciated. At the same time, in all of these things, there needs to be honest discussions.
Yeah.
And sometimes, let's say, I'm not saying, look, it's just the wider Muslim community, even imams, even leadership, we don't have honest discussions. And that's very important for us to kind of learn from mistakes and progress. So with the older generation, remember, the non-Muslim community, was it welcomed?
Yeah.
Not really. It was never dawah, it was never engagement in shida.
Yeah.
At the same time now, let's say it's a community from Pakistan, Bangladesh or India. Now a white chap walks in, a black chap walks in, a black lady walks in, an English lady walks in.
Sounds like the start of a bad joke.
Yeah, but unaccommodated.
Yeah.
Not speaking in English, not welcomed. Or maybe they become Muslims and there's a sense of kind of like, you're still not part of our community. That needs to be challenged and changed.
How did you do that in Lewisham? There's a large convert community there, right?
Yeah, very large, alhamdulillah, very, very large. Yeah, I think it's down to the community.
A lot of people say that Muslims are really, eager to get the shahada, but then they, they're like, "How takbir, assalamu alaikum, welcome to Islam."
Yeah,
and then they turn around and nobody's there to help them. It's a bit of a caricature, but how do you?
I think the dawah is from the community members. And remember, the revert community or convert community is slightly different from us in the sense that they're passionate about telling others about their faith when they become Muslim. So that kind of like, pushes, encourages for others to look into Islam and take the shahada. Then from amongst themselves, what I usually do, somebody takes shahada, you give that person a mentor. Somebody similar in age, similar in background, say, look, I want you to keep in touch with this person, help the person, call him, pick him up for the masjid, take him out for dinner, and so on. But we do a lot of projects for reverts, like a weekly dinner, trips. And remember, a lot of the reverts or converts are also youngsters, so there might be a youth trip, they're together, there's a weekly dinner, there's a monthly program. So that keeps them, in touch with the masjid and myself. And also, it's not over theoretical, in the sense that it's not just studies. The prophetic way, you live Islam. Yeah. They eat with you, drink with you. It's time for salah. They pray with you. Yeah. And then if anything, a mistake happens, you're able to kind of like in that situation, educate and say, look, well, this is not permissible. This is the way how we do it. I think that's a good.
Do you have kind of complaints of maybe racism amongst the Muslims? So like for Asian people being racist towards black Muslims, and if so, how do you deal with that kind of stuff?
From the Lewisham community?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to start cussing your own people, but it must. I mean,
it's there. It's there, but I wouldn't say in Lewisham because the community is so mixed. I think because you haven't been
exactly.
When you go there, you can't define it with an ethnic community. It's just very, very mixed. So it's not like it's a problem. If it happens once and twice, and I always nip it in the bud. If an incident happens, speak about it, from the teaching of the Prophet ﷺ and so on.
I was going to ask actually this, Sheikh. Look, the Imams as they're coming today, the younger Imams as they're coming through, do you think they're equipped to deal with the needs of the Muslim community today? So you've talked about your own journey from like 20 years ago to now. Looking at the Muslim community now with all the challenges and the opportunities we have, are Imams equipped just knowing the ilmi side, or do you think more is required from them now? Or is it okay, alhamdulillah?
Yeah, I think expectations are great from them, but there is a lack of support. Okay. So sometimes, we might think he's come from Medina, he spent 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, he must be equipped. And not only Shari'i knowledge, he's got to have management skills, put him in the position of the Imam of the masjid, he'll be able to do everything. That's incorrect. So support networks are needed. We've started up a Imams forum.
Good.
Regular meetings. We've kind of like developed a code of conduct for Imams, so they're protected, especially in dealing with, the opposite gender, when there's finance involved, to protect the Imams, protect the service users and so on. But I think support is very, very important.
This is for that you get all your young cadets to sign up to.
Yeah. Neither confirm nor deny again, yeah.
How much of the role is counselling?
I mean, remember, Lewisham community is poor, deprived community. So I would say on a daily basis, 2 or 3 hours of my time is counselling. Yeah. So whether it's, marital issues,
pastoral care.
And sometimes, because if it's a young revert convert community, it carries on. You finish the counselling session, they're phoning you, you're advising, you're out of the masjid, but you're on your phone, giving support to husband and wife and so on. So that is challenging.
Is it fun as well? Must have some funny funny stories.
Very, very, very funny stories. Not for here though.
Why not? Come on, why not? We can bleep out anyone's names.
That's fine.
What I wanted to ask, I asked this
as long as I can tell your story. Can I say your one?
Which one though? I always ask this to Abdul Wahid when he was here as well, and people kind of with more experience. What do you think the kind of future of the British Muslim community is going to be like? What are some of the challenges, some of the opportunities, and in your perspective?
I think one of the greatest challenges is the identity. That where we are being pressurized. The only faith community, pressurized to kind of like take, for our values and principles of Islam to be kind of removed from our identity. Of course, whether it's from the far right or certain government, kind of like members of the government, but that push is there. And that to us is the greatest part of our identity. Yeah, Allah Ta'ala, what does He say? هُوَ سَمَّاكُمُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ مِنْ قَبْلُ وَفِي هَذَا. He named you as Muslims in this, the Quran, and before this, before the Quran. So I think that challenge is there, and we can see it, whether it's through Prevent or whether it's through Islamophobia, whether it's through children praying in Salah and being taken away because of the Salah. Which shows you, look, it's down to our fundamental identity, of Islam. So I think that is a challenge. How do we deal with it? I think a key issue, which sometimes people take it in the wrong way, is Muslim unity. You can't deal with it as one group. This is where we need to come together and have that ta'awun and that understanding and brotherhood and face this challenge together. And the Muslim population is now, 5 million?
Yeah.
No, 2 million. But if you add the 3 million, but if you add the illegal immigrants,
it's 5%.
5%.
It's 5% and 3 million.
Yeah, 5%.
That's 2011, so it's probably more now. I did my bit.
5%, and in major cities in London, I think it exceeds 1 million.
Yeah, it's something crazy like 1 in 8 babies born in London is Islamic.
Mashallah. Mashallah.
Probably called Muhammad. One of the spellings.
So the interfaith work that you do in Lewisham, I guess of the various faith groups from Lewisham as well. Do you think you hadn't, if you weren't in such a, and I don't use the word deprived because that doesn't necessarily reflect Lewisham, but you understand with these challenges, if you've been in a more affluent area or locality, do you think you'd have the same response? The reason I'm asking this is because I attended a forum once to do with finance, faith and finance, and there was a number of priests, and all the issues they were talking about, immigrant communities from who attended their church, they don't have access to banking, which makes things difficult for them to get paid, etc., etc. So it was easy for us to connect because we're talking about challenges for our community. The response you've had, do you think you'd have had the same response if you're in a more affluent area? As in the things that you've bonded on, has it been on principles or has it been more about the people that you're dealing with? If that makes sense.
I think it's principles and the people, but also I think it's like, it's down to the Muslim community to take those steps.
Yeah.
That you might find, look, sometimes the non-Muslim community doesn't want to engage. They don't see the challenges that we are going through. I think it's the onus is on the Muslim community to go out and say, look, we want to engage and we want to discuss social issues. And some of the problems, Brexit as an example, whether you're poor, affluent, it's going to be affecting everybody. So this is something through kind of like faith leaders discuss, support, come to conclusions, give people support and help and so on.
When the Woolwich incident happened, Sheikh, did that affect your relationship with the kind of non-Muslim community? How did you deal with that time, with the situation?
Yeah. So in terms of the London Borough of Lewisham specifically, if I was to put a figure of shahadas off my head, and it's not something we kind of like monitor on a regular basis, but on a weekly basis, you're having shahadas, 1, 2, 3. Not everything we put online. Some people just say, look, I don't want to go public with it. It's private and so on.
Don't tell HMRC.
Don't tell exactly. But if I was to put a figure, I'd say maybe 10,000 shahadas through the masjid. Now imagine those 10,000 shahadas are new Muslims. They have brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, cousins, who are non-Muslims but engaging with a Muslim. And that's had an impact in the London Borough of Lewisham. The masjid has never really been attacked. If there's something happening, it's from people who are coming outside the borough, EDL, the far right, and so on. Within the Lewisham borough, generally speaking, the non-Muslims are very, very understanding of Islam and the Muslims. Yeah. Even though the percentage is not too great. Percentage of Muslims in Lewisham is 8%, or just under 8%. Yeah, so even though you have a low
official stats,
the official stats with the immigrants is 25% or something. Yeah.
So which areas do you actually service with the masjid? So it's Lewisham itself, and then
the borough of Lewisham, and then we're adjacent to Bromley, we're adjacent to Southwark, we're adjacent to Greenwich. So people do come from those boroughs. Generally speaking, a lot of the reverts or converts would come to the masjid as far as East London, North London. And they sometimes feel in their areas the masjid or the mosque is not serving their needs. So they'll call the masjid, look, I need a wali, I need support, I need help, I need classes and so on. Yeah.
And that was shown, I think, remember when, obviously you remember, but when Imam Shakeel had the case against the BBC, you were fighting back all this kind of Islamophobic coverage. And a lot of the non-Muslims, like especially faith leaders and stuff, and head of police and that kind of stuff, came out with character references. And the judge, he had to make sense of, on the one hand, there's all these people saying how amazing this Imam is, and on the other hand, there's BBC guys, meticulously gone through statements and taken bits and pieces of him and painting him as some kind of monster. And he literally had to come to the conclusion that this is a Jekyll and Hyde character. Yeah, he drinks some potion, or as though he drinks some potion, he becomes some monster. And when he speaks to Muslims, and then his kind of normal daily life with everyone else is, he's some beloved character of the community or something. But I think that really, to have all of those people speak in your defense, help you in the case, and lend you that support, I think that just goes to show it's such a
strong hold on
it pays dividends.
I hope some of this stuff is going to be edited.
Probably editing is probably going to make it worse. But it's very powerful having not in a kind of disempowered way that you have non-Muslim friends who speak up.
Kumbaya way.
Yeah, but just to show that we have real roots in the community, working for people on so many different social projects with other groups, other faith groups, with the local authorities and that kind of stuff.
I think, look, that's how we're supposed to be as Muslims. I was listening to a lecture of Omar Suleiman. Suleiman.
The second one.
The second one.
Athani,
the younger one.
Oh man!
And he mentioned something about Muhammad Ali. His first fight against Sonny Liston. He's 22 years old. It's his first fight for the heavyweight championship. And here, his promoters, they said, look, if you don't break your ties with Malcolm X, you're not going to fight. And he was ready to walk off. A man of principle. Let's say, okay, look, carry on fighting. So, that kind of like principles, I think, in today's society for Muslims. There's key issues that we have to stand up for. Palestinian rights, Masjid al-Aqsa and so on. We cannot compromise on. And other values and so on. So I think that's important. With our non-Muslims, yes, engage, but you've got your values and principles.
And both in the public sphere and in our private interactions as well. I think this is unfortunately a bit of a criticism, but I don't think we should overplay it. Is that, you know, when it comes to our interaction and dealings with each other, then we don't have the same level of integrity, but we'll speak up on some of the big issues. And I think it's important for our community to take ownership. Everything we've been saying so far, Sheikh, is about us stepping into that position that we're supposed to be in. And that means taking ownership of it in all aspects of our lives, whether you're the imam of a masjid or you're not the imam of a masjid, whether in your local school or in your local university or in your day job, you're stepping up and you're being that example for the people around you and not compromising on your values. Those who've compromised over the years, ultimately they've lost out in the dunya, and Allah knows best in the hereafter as well.
And look, that is leadership. That is what is wanted from us, from the Prophet ﷺ, in terms of kullukum ra'in wa kullukum mas'ulun ra'iyati. Like, all of you are shepherds and leaders. So whatever position we might be in, take the lead. Stick up for your principles, stick up for your values. I mean, Muhammad Salah.
Yeah.
Muhammad Salah as somebody who practices Islam, you know, does his sujood, keeps his identity, and you know, alhamdulillah, people appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not Liverpool support, are you?
And Paul Pogba.
Man United, I forgot, man.
I'm going to represent him.
Are you allowed to mention Red Devils in this podcast?
Shayateen Ahmar.
Shayateen
I don't know. I don't really follow football anymore. But I don't want to get in trouble with anyone.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah, so you're right, Sheikh. This position of taking leadership and taking ownership. Too many times we leave it for everyone else. You know, and then until it's too late. How many people talking about prevent people sleeping, and now people are realizing the impact of it. For one of a better term, the LGBT issue in schools. People knew it was coming. If you just had to read the signs, but we didn't mobilize ourselves. We were too worried about other things, and now it's here. And the challenges that we have tomorrow, we need to really step up, isn't it?
What's that saying of the Arabs have the saying, "Ukiltu yawma ukila thawrul abyad." So that kind of like
that one. The three
The
bulls.
white bull, yeah.
And the other thing is, I think, you know, sometimes leaders stand up at times, but also sometimes, not all, some of the Muslim community is very critical.
Yeah.
They look at every little thing. You made a mistake in this, and you made a mistake in that, and so on, and we put them down. And I think the discussion concerning young Imams, support and let them grow.
Yeah.
They make a few mistakes. Sometimes that needs to be overlooked. Look at the future, inshallah, you know, what you want them to achieve. So
Yeah, definitely. And also, if you think that you're better at something, or you've got specific skill in something, then give your time. Help out. The number of, mashallah, professionals we have in the city who are project managers, this, that, and the other, and they want to complain about timing, whatever, well, get involved. You know, you've got a skill. What's the point of if the only person to benefit is you and your family? That Allah has blessed you with something. Give it back to Allah in that sense. You use your time, you know, help.
So you mentioned in terms of going forward the future of the Muslims in the UK, you said one of the biggest threats is the attack on the identity, the Muslim identity. One of the things that you're pushing for is unity. What else? What else would you, from your experience, would you call our attention to say, you know, look after these areas and focus on these issues?
I think, basic understanding of the fundamentals of Islam is crucial. I wouldn't say this is kind of like we need to get too theoretical, technical, and discuss, you know, deep theological issues. But it's basic aspects of Islam. You mentioned the LGBTQ kind of like issue. You have the issue of concerning Palestine. You have the issue concerning of, you know, basic principles and values. We'll all agree on. They're part of Islam. They're kind of like, there's no difference of opinion concerning it from Muslim scholars of the past and present. Those need to be preserved. We cannot compromise on those because these are fundamental values. That, of course, also leads to, how do you preserve them? There needs to be elements of, how do you say, you know, teaching knowledge, spreading knowledge, giving tarbiyah towards knowledge. But again, not knowledge which you can say is not beneficial, theoretical, knowledge which is practical, a living practical Islam. I think those two key areas in terms of, you know, preserving those fundamentals, teaching those fundamentals, and at the same time, you know, I had two occasions, parents came to me and they said, look, and these are children that have gone through Islamic schools. My son doesn't believe in Allah. My daughter doesn't believe in Allah. Evolution, atheism, and so on. So even if it's, let's say, theology, what's the theology that is relevant that needs to be taught to youngsters today? There's some issues which might be in classical books of creed or aqidah, which might not be relevant to the average British Muslim youngster today in London. So that...
And in fact, you have to teach them that in order to make them start arguing with another Muslim. This is another thing that, if we didn't teach certain things, there would be no difference or agreement on that thing, because...
You have to teach them to argue.
Yeah. And split up and disunite.
So what are your dreams and aspirations for Lewisham Masjid now, Sheikh? So where would you like to see it go in the next 10 years?
Not the masjid specifically, but I would say, look, I would like it to be another masajid. Traditionally, the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ was the center of the community, leading the community and the nation. Why can't masajid be like this? Yeah. So whether it's kind of like political issues, whether it's kind of like social issues, whether it's issues of social justice, yeah, anything that is there, imams need to be leaders, masajid need to be leaders and benefiting society. So that's kind of not just for Lewisham Islamic Center. I say to the community, what's our vision? Make the masjid like the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. Yeah. So that's kind of like, you can say, a local vision.
Yeah.
But let's say every masjid has that vision, and then you link with those masajid.
Yeah.
But I do feel, as a side point, there is a great future for Muslims. I know that's kind of like another discussion, quite deep, but in UK specifically. Yeah, maybe not America and so on, but UK, because though
it's a bit harsh.
I think the people are very open-minded and from their fitrah towards justice and goodness and so on. So I think that
in the UK,
in the UK,
Alhamdulillah.
might be changing.
So imagine if somebody is a member of their local mosque, or maybe an imam or committee member, and they want to have that, they have that vision internally that, I want to make this mosque like the mosque of the Prophet ﷺ. Practically, how do they go about doing that?
Number of services, like what Ustad Omar mentioned. There's
You've
ways.
been upgraded.
Oh, thanks.
Ustad now. Make sure you change the lower third of his...
in terms of projects that you can be involved in inside the masjid to serve the masjid. It might be dawah projects, it might be interfaith projects, it might be social, kind of like we do feed the homeless. Yeah. On top of that, in terms of, let's say, you're more of a kind of like thinker. Yeah. How can you help the masajid in developing kind of like a strategy to advance themselves? Fundraising. There's so many
youth.
Yeah.
So I heard something like only 1% of mosques have a youth program. SubhanAllah. And it's very sad, but imagine if somebody is addicted to alcohol, a Muslim who's an alcoholic, or addicted to drugs or gambling. A lot of these services to help them, support groups, they end up going to churches and stuff, or community centers.
Yeah.
And nowhere near any mosques to help with this kind of stuff. A really sad story, subhanAllah. It's one brother, he's a talib ilm, and I won't mention which area. He noticed that there was a Muslim girl who was a prostitute in the streets, subhanAllah. And he asked her, he spoke to her, he's saying, what's going on, what's your story, why are you doing this stuff? And the answer she gave just left him speechless. He didn't know what to say. She said, I'm only doing this to raise money because I'm addicted to heroin after my brother killed himself after he saw my dad kill my mother. And he was like, how do I even, so many things wrong here. And this stuff is happening to Muslims, and where they're supposed to get the support for it.
Take it from a leadership perspective.
Yeah,
let's say it's an imam or leaders within the community or elders. What have they done? What have we done to kind of like help this situation? And most likely, or maybe in some cases, people be very judgmental.
Yeah.
Where the Messenger of Allah is saying, "Khayrun nas anfa'uhum lin-nas." You be a person that benefits people in society.
Yeah.
And there's people that came to him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he gave them opportunities and chances. Some of the Sahaba. So I think that is something else, which is you support these individuals. I was listening to one of your podcasts, I think with Brother Zishan, and I think he was mentioning kind of like the challenges that the youth face, especially through social media and so on. And I felt maybe there was, more a negative spin maybe towards it, from that discussion. But the average youngster, Muslim, even look, Sins have been in the ummah. But ask those people, do they love Allah?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ask them, do they love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? You know, we all sin and make mistakes. You'll find many have immense love. They sacrifice, they support, they give
You need to
sadaqah.
untap that potential. You need to tap that potential.
Support, and you know, and follow the prophetic methodology and bring them to closer. What's the hadith? Bashiru wa la tunaffiru, yassiru wa la tu'assiru. Give them glad tidings, bring them closer, don't turn them or push them away. So that's very, very important. And just before I came, I prayed in a masjid, Salat al-Asr, and they asked me to do a short reminder. So I spoke about parents and youngsters. Some of the inner city areas where Muslim youngsters are involved in crime, what have the parents done? So we will blame those youngsters, but have we taken the responsibility in terms of, you know, did we push them towards that direction? Did we give them enough time and responsibility and attention and love and care? So those are all discussions.
Yeah, you're right, Sheikh. Sometimes I think it's part and parcel of the time that we live in, that we live in a very nafsi, sort of self-centered time. And there seems to be less barakah in our time, and people are busier with work, and the family unit's breaking down, and so you kind of try and protect what you have. Even on a normal social level, families going to see each other seems to happen a lot less, and everything's become very formal. Before you'd have the idea of, you know, the extended family and the elder cousins and looking after the younger cousins, etc. But everyone's kind of just gone their own way, and they've lost those role models, and husband and wife both have to work to try and keep a roof over their head, and you know, the children are left alone.
Brothers were discussing this at a retreat recently, and we said someone said one of the ways to counteract this, or the last kind of bastions of that kind of extended family almost, was the estate, funnily enough. Because estates, even in the architecture, you have people kind of living in small units, but they have a shared space. And I remember someone saying back when I was in school, that one of the reasons why some people wouldn't go off the rails too much, because they had a sense of shame that the older people from my estate will see me and they'll be upset, they'll be disappointed in me, and that kind of stuff.
So, Ustad Omar, I mean, look, that as a principle and value. That, look, if we are callers towards khair and goodness, not just for ourselves, for the non-Muslims, that this is a value and a principle that needs to be pushed. And because I live in an estate. And
what's your address?
Yeah, don't worry about it. You ask that to everyone, isn't it? And you feel a sense. So on an occasion, I'm on the phone with one brother. He's like, you could say a bit of a gangster, basically, but from a different area. So
what he says about you as well, Sheikh.
And by the
Is
way,
he an OG or a YG?
I'll let you know later. So anyway, I'm parking up my car, and there's a new neighbor that's moved in, and he can hear him shouting at me. So he's like, "Look, I'm coming down." I said, "Listen, don't worry, it's a minor." "No, I'm coming down. I said, "Listen, it's a minor. I've just turned the phone." Okay, look,
what happened? Did someone disrespect you?
Slightly. But in a matter of 5 to 10 maybe minutes, neighbors have come out. Different neighbors, everybody's just gone towards him. They kind of like, reprimand him. Yeah. So he shows you, look, and that's non-Muslims. Yeah. And I think also we don't give enough credit to the non-Muslim community. That needs to be done. And sometimes we make ourselves insular. That needs to be challenged, and maybe that's another principle and value of challenging, kind of like the challenges that that we have.
Yeah, definitely, Sheikh. I mean, Salman asked earlier, isn't it, about when I came into the deen, and I do think even myself, I sometimes have a lot of baggage with this. That the dynamics of interacting, you kind of still say, "Oh, what are you allowed to do, not to do?" Almost as if you feel guilty, which is silly. It's ludicrous if you think about it, and you think about the life of the Prophet, who was he close to. But it was just the way we kind of came into it. And sometimes the way you enter something is what you kind of hold on to. And it'll be good actually to understand it without going too far. What are the boundaries for interaction, etc. Because everyone will say it around Christmas time, "Oh, can you say Merry Christmas?" Or "Can you give birthday presents? And can you do this? And can you do that?" But finding a way to interact in a sensible, value-driven, kind way. It doesn't mean that you have to do everything.
Have a nice holiday.
Yeah.
Happy holiday, yeah.
Happy holiday,
And I think it's bigger than Christmas, the interaction.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's bigger than that. The Messenger of Allah interacted with non-Muslims. So we've got to pass that stage. But also sometimes is it religious? Is it culture? Are we fearing that our cultural identity is going to be taken away by interacting? And are we kind of like not interacting because of cultural kind of like reasons? Or is it Shari'i religious reasons?
Yeah.
You know, that's another kind of like dimension.
It's a hard one to navigate because it's kind of linked to the identity issue. You know, if you're not careful, then what might start as a simple cultural change might lead to, you know, more shift in a bigger shift in your how you perceive yourself and identity in your in group and the other group and that.
So I think that discussion needs to take place.
Yeah.
Because look, when the Sahaba radiallahu anhum migrated, went to different lands, those lands kept their cultures. And you see that in the clothing, whether it's West Africa, North Africa, East Africa, and Malaysia, and so on. Everybody has their distinct
Tower Hamlets.
Tower Hamlets is an example.
Croydon
is an example. Slough, definitely. Is that where you live? What's your address?
That's where I live.
Largest trading estate in the UK.
So I think that
Halal KFC as well.
So that place, the culture wasn't changed. The deen was. Are we now keeping culture and saying, well, it's actually deen?
Yeah.
But again, the danger is sometimes you might end up losing parts of the deen too. So
one of the major difference between the time of the Prophet ﷺ and here is the Prophet ﷺ was even ethnically preaching to the same people. You know, the Quraysh had the blood bond, the same ethnicity and so forth. That's not what we have for most Muslims. I think at the moment, most Muslims they perceived as some faraway invader, if you're unlucky, or a guest.
From who? From who? Have we created that?
Yeah, could be, maybe.
Reverts will, because we have a large revert community.
I mean, that's probably one of the big assets of having a large revert community, because they feel part and parcel of the society, and they're also seen as. Yeah.
But sometimes they would ask, they want to marry. I say, okay, sister, so what ethnicity you want? I don't mind. And you'll get that a lot from white sisters. I don't really mind, as long as it's a good Muslim.
Don't tell Umar that.
Because he might tell Salman that.
Ustad Umar.
Don't tell you that.
Exactly.
You told me you had one space, didn't you, earlier on?
Moving on swiftly. Cut them out.
Who edits here?
Yeah. Salman will now.
No one very well.
Yeah, so you're saying, Sheikh, that
so they're not that bothered about ethnic background and that kind of stuff.
The point I'm trying to make is sometimes, look, we've created those barriers.
I think you're going to have a large influx of people from a certain community moving to Lewisham now, Sheikh. Promised land.
From Slough specifically.
Exactly, yeah. No, alhamdulillah, it's true, Sheikh. But it's that baggage, isn't it, Sheikh, to try and, take it off and, go ahead. But the same token, the culture has also protected the identity of the Muslim, hasn't it? To some extent. And it's weird, actually, because I was saying that I went to see a brother whose mother passed away recently, and he was saying that he's from Croydon, and he was saying, look, a lot of the revert brothers hadn't really followed up with him, but a lot of the old brothers they hadn't seen for 20 years, they attended janazah, they came to see him, etc. And he was just making a point. He wasn't making it like dismissing the convert community. He was just saying that perhaps they don't understand, they don't feel in the same way, whereas because we've been brought up in a culture where you know that if someone passed away, weddings and deaths, etc., you make a point of going. So there is that part of culture, and perhaps we don't recognize the interconnectivity with the religion. We just see it as culture, so we may discard it. But there's still hair in it. There's still hair in it.
Yeah. I remember one sheikh saying that, that sometimes that preserves the deen. So that is probably correct. But at the same time, it also kind of like stops us, certain aspects of the culture, advancing and progressing and promoting Islam for what it really is. Yeah. And with the revert community, especially in South London, remember there's been a lot of hatred that's been created.
Yeah.
So that brother, you know what? Look, I don't want to go to his janazah. He's like this. He's like that. We differ
along
on this.
ethnic grounds, or
no, not ethnic. No. Sometimes it's kind of like groups and sects and jama'at and that kind of thing. Yeah. And then who's created that as well? Where does that come from? It's not really from the reverts, it's from others.
Yes. Yeah.
Converts.
Yeah. Subhanallah. Yes, it's true. There's a balance, isn't it, Sheikh?
Yeah.
Trying to navigate through that. But I agree, definitely, Sheikh. Yeah. But I think sometimes we throw out like I was saying, maybe it's just a time reflection of our time, like treating how we treat guests. there's an Islamic importance on how we treat guests, but we also know it's a cultural importance that if a guest comes, you got to treat them well, etc. But we just seem to have generally lost
feed them.
Yeah, it's true. As in, now you can't just when you turn up someone's house, before someone would just turn up, you never know. There's a knock on the door, and you always got to have. Mum always had some biscuits ready in it, and the nice china in it. But now it's planning. You got to plan it weeks in advance. Yeah, you got to plan it weeks in advance, and
full of doodle form.
I mean, look, that's true. But sometimes, and this is not like complaining towards like the Muslim community, but a lot of times it's like the example of guests. It's what they call takalluf.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like you're going out of you don't really want to do it.
Yeah.
But because it's the culture and it's expected, now you know what? I have to force feed and cook. And is it really the sunnah of the Prophet to be this so sometimes we make religion and and it's cultural really.
Yeah.
But we make it difficult for ourselves. And sometimes so the sunnah is much simpler and easier.
Yeah.
Take weddings as an example, it's
So it's getting quite late. I'd love to continue the conversation, but we've got to pray Maghrib and get Imam Shakeel fed the finest gourmet burgers Whitechapel has to offer, mashallah. But if you enjoy the podcast, give it a like and a share. If you didn't, then go easy on us. Our egos are very fragile. We're also available now on all the different podcast platforms, so iTunes, Google, etc. I don't know what they are. Jazakumullah khair, Sheikh Imam Shakeel, for coming.
Jazakumullah khair. And also just say, Lewisham Islamic Centre has regular programs. And it's open, isn't it? People can come and attend any of the events. What's the best way of them finding out the events that are going on?
I think the website, lewishamislamiccenter.com. Yeah, that's the best. And again, thank you for giving me this opportunity and time, Ustad Omar and Dr. Salman. Hope your car's all right.
Yeah. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you to all our viewers and listeners, wherever you are listening to us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Unscripted.